Pardon me, I didn't switch my microphone on. Hello, good afternoon. I'm Israeli government spokesman Eylon Levy. This is day 137 of the October 7 war. IDF fatalities since the start of the October 7 massacre have risen to 575. That's up by one since our last update. The people of Israel grieve with the family of Staff Sergeant Maoz Morel, aged 22, who was injured in battle in southern Gaza on the 15th of February and succumbed to his wounds yesterday. An update on the October 7 hostage crisis as Hamas continues to hold 134 hostages, 32 of whom have been killed in captivity or were killed during their abduction. Yesterday, the IDF released recently obtained security camera footage of the abduction of the Bibas family into Khan Yunis on October 7th. The footage shows Shiri Bibas and her infant children Ariel, aged 4, and Kfir Bibas, 9 months at the time of the massacre, famously now aged 1, cruelly abducted from his crib. Intelligence obtained during recent IDF activities against Hamas in Khan Yunis in recent weeks indicates that Shiri Bibas and the 2 children were abducted from Kibbutz Nir Oz to eastern Khan Yunis. They were then taken to an outpost belonging to the Kataib Mujahideen terror group. The footage shows Shiri Bibas trying to shield her children with a sheet, the ginger hair visible through the cloth. They were forced into a car and whisked off. Based on the available intelligence, we are of course deeply concerned for Shiri, Ariel and Kfir, as well as the children's father, Yarden, who was abducted separately. The IDF released this footage with the consent of members of the Bibas family. Speaking today at a press conference, they said they agreed to publish the video so the world cannot forget what happened and cannot look away. A reminder, Shiri Bibas' parents were burned alive on October 7th. Cousin Eylon Eshet spoke of his anguish at the thought of burying 3 generations of one family and called on every human being with a conscience, his words, to demand the immediate release of his family and all the hostages. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also released a statement saying this heart-wrenching video reminds us who we are dealing with, the brutal kidnappers of babies. Prime Minister continued, "We will settle accounts with them. We will bring these kidnappers of babies and mothers to justice. They won't get away with it." End quote. We hope this horrific reminder of the fact that Hamas is holding a baby hostage will spur the world to put greater pressure on Hamas and on all actors with any influence over the terror group to release the hostages immediately and unconditionally. The demands that Israel should cease its campaign to liberate the hostages and simply abandon those little children and their parents in the hands of the death squads who perpetrated the October 7 atrocities are, of course, a stain on the conscience of humanity. An update from the northern arena. In the north, the IDF continues to act forcefully against Hezbollah aggression following its decision to enter this war on October 8th. Throughout the morning, IDF fighter jets struck a number of Hezbollah terror targets in Lebanon, including launch posts in the areas of Yarun and Marwahin. That's after airstrikes against Hezbollah terrorists in Marwahin yesterday. We repeat, Israel will not accept the ongoing displacement of tens of thousands of civilians and the ongoing shelling of their homes. We repeat the warning, Hezbollah must back off, preferably in the context of a diplomatic framework in accordance with UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which renders illegal its presence south of the Litani River, or else we will be forced to push it away. That's it for today's update. We'll now take your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First question from Melanie Lidman. Can you please comment on whether the Prime Minister's office is concerned about Eisenkot's letter regarding the 4 major goals of the war? Also, have any decisions been made regarding access to the Temple Mount during Ramadan? Thank you.
Melanie, regarding your first question, the Prime Minister, together with Defense Minister Gallant, Minister Gantz, Eisenkot and Dermer, continue to run the War Cabinet, and of course that is the proper place for discussions to take place about the conduct of the war as we continue to fight to bring back the hostages and bring down the Hamas terror regime. As for the question about the Temple Mount, I have no further updates since yesterday's statement.
Question from Henrietta Chakar from Reuters. Firstly, a UN report issued yesterday cites allegations of sexual abuse of detained Palestinian women and girls by Israeli soldiers, including during the Gaza war. Your response?
Sure. Let me make a comment on those repulsive allegations being made by UN officials who have been running interference for Hamas since the beginning of this war. Israel forcefully rejects those despicable and unfounded claims published yesterday by a group of so-called UN experts. I say so-called because one of those is Francesca Albanese, who has been engaging in the most appalling Holocaust inversion, who denied the blatantly anti-Semitic nature of the October 7 massacre, as the UN Secretary-General himself has acknowledged and infamously claimed that Israel has no right to defend itself from the October 7 atrocities. These officials have remained shamefully silent on the horrific sexual and gender-based violence perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th, since October 7th, and I think through their silence they've lost any legitimacy to speak on this matter or any other. It is clear to us that they are motivated not by the truth, but by their hatred for Israel and its people, and they are weaponizing and politicizing their mandates in a despicable attempt to curtail Israel's inherent right to defend itself. Now, the State of Israel will, of course, continue to uphold its obligations under international law, which we take much more seriously than those who are trying to twist it into whatever they want it to say in order to try to defend Hamas. Israel, of course, remains willing to investigate any concrete complaints about alleged misconduct when presented with credible allegations and evidence. In the case of these allegations, no complaints have been received about these despicable allegations.
Thank you. Second question from Henriette Chakar. Can you update us on the situation in Nasser Hospital? Have hostages been located there? Are there searches underway for tunnels there? When might the hospital be vacated by Israeli forces?
Sure. I have no update on the Nasser Hospital since the update yesterday, in which I explained the efforts that the IDF is making in a precise and targeted operation in order to apprehend Hamas terrorists. Hundreds of suspected terrorists have been apprehended from inside the hospital, confiscate weapons, try to find perhaps hostages' bodies, since we went in on the basis of credible intelligence that hostages had been held there and the hospital had been used to hold their bodies. As the IDF did that, it worked, first of all, having given adequate warning to the hospital to order the vacation of Hamas forces from inside. That precaution and that warning was given in accordance with our obligations under the relevant provisions of international law. The IDF also took measures to make sure that the hospital can remain operational. I saw that the head of the World Health Organization tweeted earlier that the hospital is running on the basis of one backup generator. What he neglected to mention is that that backup generator was brought into the hospital on Friday by Israel's Shayetet 13 special forces at the time that other Israeli forces worked to repair the hospital's generator and facilitated the provision of 24,500 litres of fuel to the hospital at the request of the hospital staff in order to keep it operational, while making efforts, of course, to evacuate civilians who are seeking shelter. And that is why our troops also secured a humanitarian corridor out of the hospital so that Israel can go after the Hamas terrorists hiding inside and try to find hostages or hostages' bodies without civilians in the way. Any further operational questions, I would refer to the IDF and, of course, to COGAT, which handles questions of the provision and facilitation of the delivery of humanitarian aid into Gaza.
Question from Joel Pollack, Breitbart News. Can you comment on the draft UN Security Council resolution by the United States calling for a temporary ceasefire and calling on Israel not to attack Hamas in Rafah? Is there a threat by the Biden administration in diplomatic terms?
Sure. Israel's committed to the three goals of this campaign in the war that Hamas began on October 7th, destroying Hamas, freeing the hostages, and making sure that Gaza can never again pose a threat to the people of Israel. Now, within that, we have always been open and, in fact, have been pushing for a temporary pause to get the hostages out. I'll remind you, we had such a framework in place in late November, and it is unforgivable that Hamas decided to end that hostage release pause prematurely on December 1st, when it stopped releasing all the women and children as it was obligated to do and resumed rocket fire on Israel. Now, our American allies stand foursquare behind our goals. The Biden administration has been very clear in its moral, military and diplomatic leadership in that regard. And our understanding is the US draft resolution reflects our shared position, the desire for a temporary pause to get the hostages out. Our allies, and I'll refer you to recent statements from the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, the European Parliament, etc., all understand that a sustainable cessation of hostilities is possible only after the Hamas terror regime is dismantled. I think that the British Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron actually expressed himself very eloquently in this regard in that joint column with German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock in the middle of December, in which he explained that you can't simply expect a pause in the fighting and simply hope that the fighting won't resume. Hamas will not give up its genocidal war against Israel, and so a permanent pause in the fighting is, of course, predicated on the dismantling of the Hamas terror regime. I'd point you only to the text of the US draft resolution. Security Council underscores its support for a temporary ceasefire in Gaza as soon as it's practicable, based on a formula of all hostages being released, and we certainly want to see all of the hostages back immediately and unconditionally.
Question from Hannah Julie in the Jewish press. Is there any update on access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount, specifically for Palestinian Muslims and for Israeli Muslims? Will there be a difference?
I already answered this question in the context of Melanie's question earlier. I have no update since yesterday's briefing.
Further question from Hannah Julian. Do you have specific numbers on how many Jewish communities and how many IDF bases were attacked on October 7th? We are seeing varying numbers.
Hannah, I would encourage you to get in touch with us separately and we can try to find numbers for you. That's not something that I have off the top of my head. As always, if you have specific questions that you need particular facts or figures, we advise you to try to get in touch with us ahead of time before the briefing so that we can get the relevant information for you in time.
The last question, is there any comment on the rising ferocity of pro-Palestinian demonstrators worldwide?
We think that the October 7 massacre presented the world with a very simple choice. Are you on the right side of history or not? Do you stand with the Hamas rapist regime, alternatively, or not? It is horrific to see the hate parades around the world that seek to deny Israel's inherent right to defend its people, that demand that it abandon the hostages in the hands of the terrorists we fear are raping them right now in the Hamas terror dungeons, that have been tearing down posters of the hostages. You have to have really dehumanized Israelis and Jews to tear down posters of little abducted children. And we're glad that our allies continue to stand behind us in whatever roundabout way they phrase it, in order to bring the Hamas terror regime to justice and to bring the hostages home and to ignore this despicable pressure. Pressure that, I'll remind you, these protests began not with Israel's response to the October 7 massacre, but the October 7 massacre itself immediately triggered a wave of jubilation and celebration around the world, and the hate parades that we see now are a natural extension of that spontaneous reaction we saw in response to the massacre itself.
And a last question from Lauren Izzo. Can you please lay out Israel's position and response to the United Nations Security Council vote happening today regarding the Algerian resolution to implement a ceasefire in Gaza?
Israel's been very clear since the beginning of this war. We are fighting in order to dismantle the Hamas military and governing infrastructure in Gaza, bring back all the hostages, and make sure that Gaza can never again pose a threat to the people of Israel. And that is what we are going to continue doing. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Keep safe. Thank you.